So I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate that. There wasn't a lot of notice with this one. We kind of put even though the planning has been in kind of circulation for a little while, we've not actually kind of launched it until a couple of weeks ago. So thank you so much for making the time and joining us for this conversation this evening. I'm excited about it, simply because this is something we've kind of dived into an awful lot over the last few months, and really kind of been exploring it. So I'm keen to hear what Anna says. I've not seen the slides, so it's all new to me as well. So I'm really excited to hear a little bit about it. But before we get to that point, we do like to kind of introduce ourselves, say hello to everybody, and also just to remind you that there is a team behind D.A.R.F. There's a wonderful group of volunteers. I do not include myself in that. I just, I'm a volunteer. I'm not necessarily wonderful, but I get involved, and I'm surrounded by fantastic people who do some really good stuff in their own day-to-day world, but are really passionate about creating regenerative futures and design activism. There's some of those people on the screen there. There's me in the bottom left. You're stuck with me this evening as host. And Eloise, Shreya, Savannah, and Andrea are all here, I think. But they've all been part of the organising team, and they've all been involved in, I say, creating this session this evening. So if anybody wants to say hello, Andrea, do you want to say hello and who you are?
Sure. Hi. Hi, everyone. I'm Andrea. Live in Helsinki. I'm a designer. I have my own freelance design and sustainability journey, and I help or I volunteer in D.A.R.F with everything related to events.
Thank you very much. Savannah, do you want to say hello?
Hi, yeah, I'm Savannah. I'm also based in Helsinki. I'm a designer working in sustainability, kind of visual design background, but quite new to the D.A.R.F collection. So very excited to be here with everyone.
Thank you very much. And Eloise, I know you said you want to talk, but you just want to say hello.
Yes, happy to say hello. Yes, I help co-organise the group, and I'm a service designer and futurist outside this, and yeah, really looking forward to today's session.
Wow. Shreya, yeah.
Hi everyone, welcome. So I'm a brand strategist, like an independent brand strategist that helps companies in terms of like sustainability, and I'm all the way in India, so it's like pretty much midnight here and happy to be a part.
Thank you for joining us, Shreya. And I'm Carl, and there are the volunteers on the call, bro. So if we go through everybody, we might be here for a little while. So at the end of the session today, I'll put a link into the LinkedIn group, to the Slack group and the LinkedIn group, and we'll to connect people there as well. So there'll be plenty of time to get to know people. Just a quick agenda for you. So there's a quick kind of welcome, and then I'll introduce the theme, introduce Anna, who will kind of give us our little bonfire tale, trying to answer the question of the theme of the evening, and then plenty of time to really kind of digest the topic, have a bit of a group conversation, have some reflections, any kind of particular interjections or talking points you want to raise. We'll have time for that. And then we'll have a little bit of a reflection on the key points and potential kind of next steps and call to action at the end, and where we can take the conversation. So very quickly, quick manifesto recap. Who are we? International network of professionals passionate about sustainability. We stand for more just, equitable, green and generative futures. We feel limited in our work context and to take a stronger standard to accelerate speed of change. We're action-based inquirers, doers and makers. We integrate learning and doing. What do you want to do? Just those three kind of core strands there in terms of expanding the collective imagination about what's possible. I appreciate that this evening's talk about is what is possible, is it even possible? So we'll kind of push those boundaries a bit this evening. We want to question the current system and constructively challenge the status quo. And also we want to explore post-capitalist, post-fossil fuel worlds. And just in case you weren't here for the last Bonfire Tales, just a reminder that D.A.R.F has now joined Design Declares. And if you've not come across that group before, definitely recommend you taking a look at it and then wondering about how you might get involved as well through your own work, through your own organization, and through your own work. So, Bonfire Tales. So this is a chance really, this is a concept that we tried out back in October, where we had some guest speakers to talk to us about their work, and just as an aid of learning and sharing some practice, and a bit of provocation around a theme. And this evening we're going to be having a look at beyond greenwashing. Are regenerative businesses even possible? Now, we're fully aware that regenerative businesses have been looked at, have been reviewed. There's books around regenerative businesses and how to create them, what those business models might look like, etc. I think what we're trying to do is take a step back from that and kind of almost reiterate and say, well, hang on a minute, does regenerative business actually happen? Are they truly regenerative? Or obviously kind of, is it a bit of kind of extended greenwashing? And this came from a conversation that we had very briefly a few months back within the Slack group. And we thought it would be worthwhile actually diving a little bit deeper and opening it up to a wider audience. So it is with my absolute pleasure to welcome you to Anna Bertmark. And I'll let her introduce herself. So Anna, I'm going to hand over to her and stop sharing. And then if you want to share your screen with the group, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, will do. Hi, everyone. Firstly, thank you so much for having me here tonight. Bonfire Tales. Yeah, it's a bit cold in my flat, so I was like thinking just trying to like summon the warmth of a bonfire right now because it's a bit chilly in my flat where I'm sitting. I'm in the south of England in Brighton, by the way, and it's about 6 o'clock in the evening here. But yeah, to tell you a little more about myself, my name is Anna. I'm an independent design researcher and lecturer. Got a specific interest in designing for systems change and regenerative value creation and futures. So I recently completed a master in sustainable design at the University of Brighton. And yeah, currently doing also on the, someone you might have heard of, Regenesis group. They do a course called Regenerative Practitioner Series. I've just signed up to that in December. So I'm just on like my first kind of couple of weeks into that course. So I'm really trying to learn as much as I can currently about regenerative practice and design really, and what that means, and not just in theory, what it means in practice as well. So I'm really kind of been looking at this area for about 2-3 years now. So I'm just going to really talk through some of the kind of there's not much, obviously it's a huge topic. I'm going to just really talk about a bit of the surface area, but mainly some definitions, and also kind of what I find most exciting when I was I do my academic work in the past couple of years. So I'm also very interested, my work in the past couple of years has been very much inspired by especially this paper called Strategy for Regenerative Business, written by Tobias Hahn and Maya Tam. So what brought me to researching regenerative businesses, what I call them kind of tools for wealth and value creation, is really the changing conditions for how we trust and have confidence in how we get our needs met, and how this affects our daily negotiation with the future. So the future is very kind of, it's all these things are quite very much very close at heart to this, how I see regenerative practice and design. And that's kind of really more like about how we are going to ensure our comforts while kind of ensuring ourselves from future suffering, which is kind of at this kind of big kind of topic that, looking at living in crises, living in yeah, with all these kind of the conditions that we kind of we're facing, although our world isn't really designed to really look at those issues. So mainly it's about like how we get what we need and want without really destroying ecosystems that we rely on. So I see regenerative design as a really quite an optimistic alternative narrative. It's a theory and a story that gives us hope and permission to explore how we made a redesign away from these mechanistic and linear thinking processes, which most sustainability efforts are still, I find, clinging on to. And I find that really risks to kind of perpetuate this illusion of progress because it's really not working. Things aren't changing fast enough. Well, and then looking at regenerative principles are really a lot more radical and ambitious. Regeneration recognizes causality and asks for a deeper, more critical view and inquiry about the purpose and potential of human activity on the planet and design of the tools that we have for value creation. So it demands like a quite different value logic and self-awareness, but there's no real toolkit or kind of standard for regenerative business, regenerative practice, because it's very place-based, it's ever evolving, it's dynamic. So it's more based on kind of more intuitive and qualitative analysis. And but thankfully, economic value logics, which kind of really drive what we value and how we get that, has changed quite regularly throughout human history. If anyone's really interested to learn more, I know Mariana Mazzucato does a really good TED talk about it. So I think that also gives a bit of hope that it's ever evolving, how we see the world and how we see it, look at ourselves. So I think this question of whether or not regenerative business can exist, I always like to kind of look at how we define these both words. So Raymond Cole's definition of regenerative design is designing the capability of the constructed world to support the positive co-evolution of human and natural systems. But the dominant business tools that we have are designed to optimize and maximize them for one thing. So one type of value is financial. So our current system doesn't really take a holistic look at what's around and doesn't see the world as a web of relationships, and business doesn't really see itself as a small part of this web of relationships. And also looking at the legal definition of a business is that really it's kind of defined as any activity or enterprise entered into profit. So it's a legal role, which according to section 172 of the UK Companies Act is to prioritise the financial interests of shareholders. That's it. Everything else kind of comes second and third to that. So it's a pretty reductive kind of goal and definition when this tool could be used for so much more. And some of you might know have heard about the Better Business Act in the UK. It looks to change this legal kind of legal definition of the corporate law. They tried to change it, I think, about 15 years ago, but it wasn't successful. So there's a lot of work happening in this area to really kind of unlock this legalities to really open it up so it can be redefined a bit. But to contrast this, as you see another kind of quote here about the definition of or description of what a business can be. Zita Cobb of the Shorefast Foundation, which I'm going to talk about a bit more later on. She describes business as a tool for the living matter, and by using money as a device to bring people together and be productive. So it's really to evolve and redirect the purpose of business kind of has recently become more popular with the B Corp movements that we're aware of, and changing governance models to align with a more preserving and restorative kind of ambitions. But the fact is that any purpose can be overwritten by the owners of a company, even if they're a B Corp or a community industry company, unless there are other safeguards in place. So a proven way to prevent this is to give a measure of control to an independent trust that acts as a guardian of the company's values. So that we've seen that recently with Patagonia, and also maybe some of you have heard of Library of Things. They're a tool library. They're doing a lot of kind of talks about this at the moment about how they've changed the governance model and how they're looking to fundraise using alternative fundraising methods. Faith and Nature is another company. who has recently rewritten their constitution and appointed nature to its board as a corporate director. So represented by a non-profit and legal NGO called Lawyers for Nature. So which ensures that the business decision are informed and imbued with a long-term view of the health of nature taken into as a whole. So these kind of, there's this work and kind of basically hacking the kind of corporate documents in a way to kind of add, change them a bit to really kind of not just go around this kind of the legal kind of law that they all have to adhere to, but to see like who is involved, who's the owner, and who's the government, who's governing it. So, but I think that if you really want to look further than that, so this is all examples of businesses started as making products or kind of lending products or looking at, a bit more product focused. So if you want to take it a level further, recent research into regenerative business strategies, which, this paper by Hannah and Tamps, their research shows that socio-environmental systems are unstable, they're undetermined with multiple equilibria, and they cannot be predicted with certainty. So socio-environmental systems saying like the way of the nature of how they work is unpredictable. And to align with this, they looked at regenerative practices and looked at ideally they should be procedural and based on ongoing experimentation. And they advised basing business initiatives or reasons for starting a business on what the socially environmental system requirements are. So looking outside in rather than kind of deriving social environmental strategies from a business perspective inside out in order to shift from negative externalities being inevitable. So that means like, that rather than looking at like, oh, we make a product, how can we make it sustainable? They look at what are the current needs of the social environmental system, and how can we really, help grow the capacity of that. But the latter is kind of the most it's most sustainable business models are kind of approach from the kind of inside out model, if that makes sense. So the research really suggests that regenerative capacity of an organization or business really exists on a spectrum. So it's not just it's regenerative or it's not. They identified levels of regenerative ambition and capacity into three main areas. So they found it, so they kind of divide into preserve, restore, and enhance. So it's quite similar if you've seen Bill Reed's kind of map of degenerate, sustainable, and regenerative, that kind of diagonal kind of map. So this is really looking at defining regenerative capacity on that top and what that might look like. So I kind of looked at the paper they wrote and kind of adapted their research of principles and practical applications into nested maps. So they're defining enhance us, which kind of looks at really kind of you can see in the squares there, kind of it's really defines the enhanced aspects of each category, and the blurred lines can highlight the nuance of the capacity principles when applied in practice. So it's like, it's a bit of scale. So they conclude that building capacity for enhancing regenerative strategies require flexibility, tolerance of ambiguity, systems thinking, and the willingness to be open to ongoing experimentation and kind of forging unusual alliances. So I would say that our present models for business of like the why and the how are not really designed for these kind of principles and enhancing regenerative, impact and ambition. So that's kind of a bit of we still got a bit of disconnect and work to see how our business models could really be regenerative by design and look at these principles and actually kind of implement them from the start, and just seeing that as the purpose for really starting a kind of a value generating kind of organization. So it's so much more than optimizing business operations for one product or service. It's more like looking at yourself as a regenerative agent about how can you kind of go into the system and make it better. So one example I found that I feel kind of best aligned with the enhanced levels of regenerative aspiration and capacity is the Shorefast Foundation, or Shorefast on Fogo Island in Canada, which was founded by Zita Cobb, amongst a lot of the group of people on this island. And it's an island, which I think is also, you know, lends itself to the regenerative kind of approach, because the history of this place is quite interesting as well. It's for fishing communities, several communities in the island, villages around this island for many decades, for about a couple of 100 years. And once that kind of big fishing industry came in, and kind of trawlers and stuff came in and took over and kind of really competed out these small fishing communities, they realized something had to happen, and they had to do something to really keep people living on in these communities, and because lots of these islands were, people didn't have any work, so they had to move into the mainland, things like that. So those are these kind of reasons why to really explore regenerative thinking for these areas. So the Shorefast model consists of a registered charity and a suite of social businesses. And they consist of a community-owned luxury hotel, which employs local residents, and all furniture that they have is made on the island and carries their economic nutrition label, which you can see there. It's quite clever. It's like really to communicate how the income is distributed to really help the local economy thrive. So I've identified this as a regenerative business as it considers its unique resources and its geography and human history, like the fishing communities, you know, basing business initiatives on the socially environmental system requirements to really ensure the needs of future generations. So yeah, to conclude, like, if I think regenerative businesses are possible, whether they can exist or not really depends on how we define it. And if regenerative capacity and ambition are seen as being on the spectrum, then yeah, I do think it's possible. Although there are ideas of human purpose and economies and tools that are really not quite designed to be regenerative. So there are barriers to this which are, you know, systemic. So we need a mind shift, I think, in how we understand and see ourselves. A mind shift in how to understand and see these, you know, elements. As having systemic impacts on our purpose to be to really evolve the capacity, you know, on which, you know, in the end of the day, that's what kind of our future and you know, kind of depends on. So, you know, don't kill your customers' living systems, you know, in short. And so I think to question, you know, this regenerative business thing is, I think almost like not starting with the wrong question, but, you know, believe you first have to ask, how can we change the dominant economic value logic, and how can we see ourselves as part of the greater system, you know, first and foremost. But equally, as a designer, I think we still can, you know, redesigning our tools will really change what we make, because what we design kind of does design us back in how we impact and how we understand the world. So yeah, I think every effort is definitely valuable in this kind of, you know, in this mission. So yeah, that's no, thank you. That's I'd love to hear any questions or any thoughts anyone has on this, or anything to add. That'd be really interesting. So I'm going to stop sharing now.
I just want to say well done. I was super. I've got loads of questions. Obviously, I don't want to dominate. But also I'm going to hold back the horde. So I'm going to just kind of say to people, just hold fire just for a second, because I'm really struck by the parameters and the constraints that are placed in terms of actually the definition of a business is actually what needs to change in that system, and our understanding of what a business is there to do. I think that's, you know, that is a real kind of crux for us to try and explore, perhaps kind of beyond today. I just wondered whether you had any examples of where a business has transitioned from maybe a culture and a mindset and a structure around preservation, and what they did to try and move towards enhance in whatever kind of those areas were, and what might have been those conditions to help that journey from one state to a more regenerative one.
I think looking at these examples I mentioned, like, I think Patagonia is one of those examples, I think, which are very well known, and there's also information about how they did it. I guess it all starts with the, you know, going from quite a traditional business model to the the founder going, actually, I want my company to, because again, it's that kind of giving, looking at the future of it, when you have to kind of step away and you have to kind of, when you're knowing that you're not going to live forever kind of thing, and you kind of know what the plan of the future is for a company, and that decision of going, actually, I want my organization to actually be at the service of the planet, through the medium of making jackets, so it's like, and looking at how that might work. It is that thing of, step one is looking at the governance model, and who owns it, and who gets to decide, and also those setting in constraints, saying, like, we're not going to do these, we can grow a company, but we're not going to grow it in this way because we know that that's going to be degenerative, but it takes, I think, a group of people, to really go in and have a look at and decide what those constraints are and what it means.
Great. So very much we're ahead then about that kind of governance and leadership, and actually setting the scene, and actually being purpose-driven, mission-driven, whatever it is saying actually it's got to be a desire to make that happen in the very first place. Actually, that comes and starts from the top. That sounds that I've had to go on for sure.
But again, as we know now, it's voluntary. There's no laws against doing it differently. So yeah.
So then the policies and the carrot and stick and everything else that part of that system that the business operates in and stuff like that, absolutely. But anyway, I don't want to dive into too much time that other people that want to ask about. So there have been a couple of questions on the chat. I'm going to come back to those shortly. If anybody wants to ask a question, if you want to pop your hand up, and then I'll invite you to unmute and ask Anna any questions you have. Stunned into silence, Anna. Absolutely stunned.
It's a lot of, it's happy to share. Obviously, if you want to get in touch on LinkedIn or email or anything like that.
I'll dive into the chat that if anybody wants to ask you directly. So Carolina has asked, any thoughts about if any sector could move to regenerative?
I can try now. Sorry, I'm cooking in between, so that's what I didn't want to open, like the camera and the microphone. But yeah, I will give it a try. Thank you very much for the presentation. I think regenerative is a very interesting concept, and I've been trying to, I'm learning about it, but so far, papers, most of the papers and examples, such Patagonia, I found this strongly related with tourism, regenerative tourism, and agriculture. And I'm just wondering how we can translate all of these principles to any other sectors, like manufacturing or like automotive, which is very common where I am right now. So yeah, that was more like my question. So just to know your thoughts about it.
Yeah, I think there are really good examples of, as you say, especially agriculture. I know that I'm not that up to date about what the movements are now around regenerative agriculture, but I know there's a lot of popularity. I know they're in the UK. I know that the government starts subsidising regenerative agriculture because it's become so popular with farmers. They see it. I think it's also that thing when we are just like I think those sectors, tourism and agriculture, I think really perhaps not that easier, but those who are, you really see it and you can recognize it because they are so close to nature, and nature is almost, you have those feedback loops which are very, very short. So you can you're very close to your impacts, they're on your doorstep. So I think that's one of those things that motivates and also have the people who live, closer to nature have a better understanding on our impacts on nature, So that's why I think agriculture farmers, they can see it every day. They see, they know their land, they know the nature that they work with. It is a collaborator, in their work. So that becomes so I think that's why we see it but it's when it comes to other sectors, I think it's really tricky because ultimately they're mostly based on products and services, and the whole premise on regenerative thinking is like, we shouldn't focus on the product or the service. We should see ourselves as, well, ourselves, or we are saying, the regenerative approach of like, well, what are we doing with this thing that we're making? What's the reason for it? Does it even have, is it needed? Who needs it, and how is it made, and what impact does it have? So it's that thing when you're seeing yourself more and more as I know that Regenesis had a good example actually in their book about there was a kind of a food shop which had lots of connections with local farmers in this town in America, and they wanted to move. They were a food co-op, so they wanted to move from they wanted to have a building which had like solar panels on the roof, and they had some funding. And then they started thinking regenerative about the value they were providing for the community as a food shop. And then they evolved that into being like, actually, we are now, they became a network for linking in with the local economy, with linking in like collaborating closer with farmers and really educating the population on where their food came from. So they became like what they call the regenerative actor. Or agent, so they saw the value that they provide wasn't the product, wasn't just the food, it was so much bigger and so much systemic. So I think it's hard to when you already are an established company that make things, I think it's much harder to make it to rethink and apply regenerative principles. But who knows, we'll see we'll see how these things evolve, because I think these ideas are just starting to really kind of be picked up.
Thank you for that. I think a lot of it is about.
Thank you very much for your.
Nice,
Yeah, thank you very much.
It's really interesting.
I think a lot of that goes back to that leadership and actually that decision making, the conscious decision making to actually go on that path and on that journey. Just to look back, there was an exercise I did last year around kind of some business model canvassing and kind of agile thinking, etc. We actually put into the stakeholder section, into the customer section, nature, to about kind of local rivers, local woodland, animals, and so on and so forth. So it actually made people think, actually, I've got to build for them as well. And I thought that was that was a useful exercise. Matteo, you've got your hand up, and please do feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation, first of all, and also for just providing this space. So I just basically, I'm on a career break to kind of understand what regenerative economy business can be. So this is absolutely fantastic to hear. So my question is more like, how do we differentiate the concept of regenerative business to other very much similar concepts that I came across over the last few years? Transition design, net positive, circular economy, climate justice. My feeling is that there is an ambition and unmet need for society to go towards something that some have defined as well-being economy. So I don't know if you have come across any of these other kind of topics, and if you sort of have had any idea on how would you differentiate a regenerative business from these other concepts themselves.
Yeah, I think again it goes back to that why I picked up that why I got so inspired by this academic paper that I mentioned is the way that they kind of look at like calling this business purpose inside out. So looking at I would say like regenerative business is so different because it sees itself as like, I'm not here to just focus on the object or the thing that's being made. It's just looking at itself as part of a network and how it can help that network thrive in many ways. So looking at like kind of almost like a multi-capitals where you have several types. You don't look at just generating financial value, you look at human, there's natural, there's social, there's all these others. So it's like you're looking at it more holistically. So I think circular economy is a really good example when I'm like thinking like, well, it's still, although it's a very good tool and a solution for looking differently at objects, it still feels very object materials based, which is fine for objects and materials. But it's still looking at that kind of the problem of materials and objects and how that can be solved. In looking a bit like and it's still sometimes a bit linear as well. I mean, I think it's great for a lot of things, but when you really have to zoom out and look at how you really work systemically, just with humans and nature, and not just looking at objects and materials. I think the regenerative business model definition is it just gives more potential, and it's also looks at itself as like almost like a part, like an organism, you know, in the system, rather than looking at just solving for a material and object, if that makes sense. But yeah, there's all these, I mean, obviously net zero and not carbon looks at carbon. So I mean, these are all parts of the toolkit that we need, you know, they're all very important bits. But what I like about regenerative business is like that definition of looking at it's seeking to create value or purpose for business from the social and environmental kind of needs, requirements, rather than just thinking about the human. So it looks like, so it doesn't center the human as much. Yeah, if that makes sense. Yeah, this is like such a fascinating big topic, and there's so much work being done. But yeah, no, it's really great. I think you really need to get you to do some talk. If you're going to spend a year researching, yeah, we need to get you in and share your findings.
I'm not going to spend a year, I hope, because I can't afford it, but but definitely going to share the findings once I get there. Thanks for the answer. Thank you.
No worries. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that takeaway for me is very much about, rather than focusing so much on a regenerative business, is actually thinking about the business as part of regenerative practice and the ecosystem. And actually, that's maybe a way to resolving some of that tension. And actually, it's about behavior. Yeah, there's lots to kind of recap on. But I've got another question for you from the chat. The wonderful Zainab has said, have you come across any interesting examples of business model explorations or value exchange models around regenerative business? She also says, thank you very much for the presentation.
So that question, oh, hi, Zainab, sorry. Sorry, when you say that question again, sorry?
She's asked, have you come across any interesting examples of business model exploration or value exchange models around regenerative business?
Maybe I can a little bit explain also now that I'm here. So I think it's very interesting what you just said, that businesses, it's more about as a network and try to create this financial and other type of value for the network partner. So in a way, we can carry the responsibility of our other network partners' interest in the heart. And that's quite contradictory to our current business models, where the interest is always self-driven. So I'm kind of interested in if you have come across any business models or definitions, how that can be structured and modeled. And
I haven't found any. You mean like ways to do it, like tools or models, things like that? No, because I think that's the whole point. I know some of you might have heard of Jenny Anderson, who is also a regenerative practitioner, and I think she got asked, I saw this on LinkedIn, she gets asked by lots of business leaders, like, oh, have you got a toolkit we could use to become regenerative? And he's like, no. It's not about a tool, it's about a complete mindset shift. And so that's why it's so, and also this paper, they also say like it's really tricky to, when you've already got a business structure that is set up in this, you know, in our perhaps the dominant way of looking at business and how we structure it and the tools we use to make them and all these things and how we value them and how we reward is what's rewarded, you know, by what activity. Sorry, I just lost my thread. Yeah, it's kind of it's not, you know, it's very hard to shift that. because almost like you have to almost create a regenerative business from a very different, from the ground up, you know, from having a different mindset from the start. Because you just have to look at, because there's that thing of looking at, like, well, usually the product you make is, or your activity is usually based on all these, you know, prevailing structures of having a certain goal, or having a, you know, financial value kind of goal, and you've used the tools to make, and then to shift from that to that, usually it's because it's in conflict in a lot of ways. And to shift it once you've started one way and then changing it on the halfway, it's like, it's very strange. But that's why I kept going back to, like, I think just Faith in Nature and Patagonia as examples who've done, trying that, you know, few decades in as being a more conventional company, and then trying to shift it through changing the governance model, and then going, but that probably requires, they've got the financial, you know, the resources to do that, but it's a risk. It's still seen as a risky thing. That's why it gets headlines, you know, that's why we've heard of it, because it's like, oh, what does that mean? What does it mean to change that? Can you still, you know, keep going? Is it going to survive? You know, all these questions, which are, it can feel quite threatening, I think.
I think there's, sorry, Zainab, is there anything you wanted to follow up with? Yeah, cool. Yeah, I think there's going to be a conscious contract almost between businesses to enter that space collectively and find that value exchange, isn't there? And like you said, it's quite often founders, business owners, etc., that's not their school of thought. It's a case of, actually, what can I do to generate my own comfort and financial security and that of my employees, and that's my responsibility. But you then have to open up into those other contracts and mindsets is a challenge, for sure. I'm just conscious of time, so I have the lovely Mariella with her hand up, and please do feel free to unmute and ask your question.
Yes. So my question is related to some thoughts. I'm gonna try to be brief about it, but the thought is that some business model that are like either regenerative or more sustainable, or take account like socioeconomical perspective in combined with the environmental perspectives, are based on an assumption of an economic system that is fixed, that is kind of there without much questioning of it. For example, some like many of these business models rely on luxury items, Patagonia included, where in order to gain that luxury, people has to go deeper into the system that is the same system that is creating all the environmental problems that we know. And on the other hand, there is like other line of thought of like new economics thinking and like related ideas that go like deeper into changing the prevailing economy paradigm. So have you encountered like synergies between like business perspectives that question the kind of the economic paradigm from above?
Ooh. I can't say it's a tricky question. I'm not I can't say I've found any specifically, but I know what you mean, that it is that thing of, it belongs, almost like regenerative thinking belongs to a different, you know, economic paradigm, for sure. It's that thing of it keeps, I think, is the Zita Cobb, who's several really good resources if anyone's interested to hear about her, you know, to her, she does a lot of really good talks on this, that thing of sense that some things are sacred and some things have objective value. And in our current economic value logic that we're in, you know, it's all subjective value. You know, everything's worth whatever we feel it's worth, you know, with very little consideration about what it might be, what value it might have to non-humans or to, you know, future humans, you know. So I think that's something that is, I think, I'm not sure if it's explicitly, as you know, as you say, kind of in Congress or questioning as such, but there are, I think it's more aligned to, yeah, definitely a quite very different worldview. Yeah, I'm not sure. Sorry, I'm not sure if I answered your question very well, but yeah, I'm not sure if that helps.
No, thank you, Anna.
Questions tonight.
No, that's really useful. I think part of it is the fact there's a journey to go on. There's still so much to explore and unpack. And what does it look like? What could it look like? That's part of this conversation.
Yeah, but that's so interesting, and what I find so fascinating with regenerative, you know, principles or philosophy, that it questions our current system, and rightly so, and it offers a hopeful narrative, even though we might not have enough or satisfactory examples of that's regenerative, you know, because it's so it's still evolving, and it's, although, you know, there's all the, but the good thing is, like, that's where I like, you know, to see examples such as Shorefast, although Shorefast conditions are quite unique, and you know, not everyone is an island that have those conditions that you can, and perhaps taking those risks, and then have those capacities for collaboration that it's hard work, but then it's not easy because it's different, but then running a business is never easy, you know, and creative value sometimes is hard as well. So but finding new ways and finding these references, that gives us, you know, hopeful reference for how it can be done.
A hopeful future for sure. And yeah, I mean, I took away from your presentation, what was it? It was the economic nutrition. I loved that, and that level of transparency is something that every business can start to do. Every business can do that. It requires a bit of effort for sure, but yeah, people can start to create that transparency. There were a couple of other questions, but I'm really sorry, folks. I've kind of run out of time because it's too much of a good conversation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post some of those questions into the LinkedIn, and sorry, into the Slack group for Anna to start kind of answering and responding to there, if you're okay with that, Anna.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Great. And then people, please do join, and then kind of carry on the conversation. The beauty with Slack as well is that you can obviously kind of ask questions and record voice notes, etc. So you can actually have a conversation. You don't necessarily need to type everything out. But thank you so much. I just wanted to very quickly recap on some key points. I'm going to share my screen again. Eloise and Andrea, I'm sure, have been very kind and kept us going by summarizing some of the key reflections from today. So just a bit further down here is, there we go. This is Eloise's handiwork. You can spot it a mile off because it's organized. It's just, yeah, something I cannot do. She just managed to kind of digest and divest information so easily and so well. So thank you very much, Eloise. Nature as a shell, so there's kind of discussion insights, just to kind of quickly look into some of this about kind of, can any sector, I think that's a good question, is actually, there's relatively low hanging fruit, as you mentioned, around kind of agriculture and some of the tourism, but actually, when you start looking at kind of finance sector, is that even possible? And actually, you know, what does that look like? And some of those more kind of, you know, focused on wealth generation and capital generation. The feedback loops, important kind of to build that into your business. Regenerative as a mindset shift more than a tool. And I think that's part of this ecosystem and that conversation, and obviously how do you get the right people around the table to have that conversation with will be a big part of the journey too. Circular economy tool to linear. There's quite obviously a lot of other economic models and tools, including things like donut economics to certainly kind of bring into the conversation too. Create other values for the network partners, and actually, yeah, those businesses not just seeing themselves as sector or industry silos, but actually they're part of a bigger ecosystem and economy that they need to shift. And actually, how do you kind of create those conditions? Thank you so much. This is all absolute gold. So what we'll do is we'll kind of carry on this conversation. I just want to say thank you so much again for everybody's time and during the conversation. I look forward to carrying it on in the Slack group. So thank you so much, everybody. Have a lovely evening.
Thank you so much, everyone.